My name is Carin Watson. I oversee SU's learning and innovation programs. And I'm going to do a little bit of an intro before I get into a conversation with Kyle now. Out of curiosity, how many of you already know Kyle or have heard him speak? There's always several in every crowd. He's becoming an infamous or a famous entrepreneur. So Kyle and I have actually worked together for the past 3 years. When I first started at Singularity University, I oversaw the corporate programming at SU Labs. For those of you, I think Peter mentioned SU Labs on stage yesterday, but for those of you who missed it, SU Labs is really where the doing happens, where the action happens at SU, where we build projects with startups and corporate teams and development partners, teams from government, academia, et cetera. And we believe that if we are really going to tackle the world's most intractable challenges and solve these grand challenges, then we need to bring together this diverse ecosystem of people to have new conversations and new collaborations. So that's what SU Labs does, and Kyle brought his Lowe's Innovation Labs team there about 3 years ago to basically live with us for a year and plug into our ecosystem and drive some really interesting innovations. So one of the things that I do at SU is I speak about becoming an exponential organization, about corporate innovation in our classroom. I've been in corporate America for 20 years. I've been in corporate innovation for the last 10, and I talk about it in the classroom. And the one question I'm always asked is this one. Any of you think about this? Any of you work for an old, slow, boring, hierarchical organization? Innovation's really hard for those companies, and oftentimes the best examples of companies who are driving disruption are Apple, Facebook, Google, Elon Musk, Peter Diamandis, right? But most companies still don't know how to operate like that. So the reason why I love bringing Kyle on stage with me, and the reason I loved having Lowe's in the lab with us, is because they truly are an example of one of these companies who 3 years ago I personally would have said, maybe Lowe's wasn't terribly cutting edge, and now I would, and it's because of the work that Kyle has done. So Kyle has an interesting innovation playbook, at least how I would define the playbook, and I'm going to let him talk about it, but there are a few interesting components that I'm going to ask him to share with you today. The first one is the way that Kyle thinks about innovation, or has built this recipe, if you will. Everything is rooted in this knowledge of exponential technologies. In fact, I think you were the one that drew the linear path to doom. I think that got circulated all over Lowe's. So this mindset around exponentials and how these technologies are growing exponentially and converging in new ways, Kyle is the one who's pushing this narrative inside the organization, and everything has emanated from that. The second part of the playbook has to do with using science fiction to paint a picture of the future. Hopefully some of you got a chance to attend our science fiction workshops over the last 2 days. Kyle really introduced us to that, to the value of allowing people to not think about how to fix what you have today, or your company today, but rather think about what the world should look like, what home improvement should look like in 5, 10, 20 years, and then work backwards and build a roadmap towards that. And he's become really expert at doing that. He's going to talk to you about that. And then finally, Kyle uses this phrase called uncommon partners. And it's kind of a weird, odd expression. But what he means by that, in my words, and we'll let him share his own, but there's tremendous value in this intersection of seemingly unrelated ideas and people and organizations. And Kyle believes that his job and his team's job is to seek out those organizations who are sort of unlikely potential collaborators for Lowe's. So he doesn't want to spend time talking to the partners that everyone else in this space are talking to. So when I went to Kyle 3 years ago and said, hey, I've got, a nanotechnologist or a quantum computing guy that I think you should meet with, he doesn't ask why, rationalize that to me. He says, of course, because he's curious and he's interested and he wants to explore what might exist. That's a really important part of the playbook. And of course, all of this, once he goes through this playbook, rapid prototyping and the ability to execute quickly, I think is a fundamental part of the playbook. One final thing I want to say, because he probably wouldn't say that this is part of his playbook, but I'm going to say it for him. This is a really important part of the playbook, and it's Kyle himself. So Kyle is the most effective and impactful entrepreneur that I have ever encountered in my career. And it's because of the obvious reasons. He's an exceptional entrepreneur, he's curious, he's resilient, he's scrappy, all of those things. He's also what I would call a denter. He dents his organization. He's a corporate irritant, if you will. No offense, Kyle. But his job is to do this to the CEO every day, saying, you've got to do this, you've got to prioritize this, you've got to make the future Lowe's as much of a priority as next quarter's earnings report. And that's really, I think, what makes him exceptionally effective. And I know he hates when I do that to him. So he's leveraged this playbook to produce a whole bunch of new solutions. And I'm going to let him describe these to you today. I think the last slide is this. Okay,
cool.
So that's hopefully brief context. And now what I'd love for you to do, Kyle, I have some questions for you. I'd love for you to share a little bit more, in more detail, how you've made this playbook come to life inside of Lowe's. So first, perhaps what you could do is give the headline version on those products, those solutions that came out of this playbook, so people have a sense of the kinds of truly disruptive innovations you've been driving at Lowe's.
Yeah, so we're at the end of this conference, right? So if you haven't heard about exponentiality, then I don't know where you were, but
you've been in the lobby.
But I don't. It would still hit you in the lobby too. But so we really believe in that, like honestly and truly. And so Carin showed the linear path to doom, and that's really what we're facing. And the cool thing about being in a retail organization is you have an opportunity to gauge how things are working or not working, almost in an experimental design on an ongoing basis. And people are either buying stuff, they're coming in, or they're not. And those are very real metrics. And that's why this thing is very apparent in retail. You see these brands that used to be the venerable, everywhere, could never go, and they're gone, or severely, severely diminished. And so we recognize we're not immune from that by any stretch. So we have to meaningfully innovate, and that means being on the exponential curve. So that means working with uncommon partners and all of those things to be able to make that happen. So my background's in behavioral science, specifically on neuroscience side of things, which is another story for another day. But I spent a lot of time trying to understand how people make decisions and how people take in new information. And they don't do it in PowerPoint form. They do it through storytelling. So the way I was taught in business school, I have an MBA, was that you tell stories in a PowerPoint, but it's usually just like headlines in sequential order. That's not a story. A story has characters, conflict, and narrative arc, and we use those things like Star Trek and Stargate and my favorite, and all these other ones as shorthand to get us to where we want to go. So why can't we manufacture that internally ourselves to find a way to get everyone on board to what we're trying to achieve, rather than the bullets behind it? And so we started experimenting with that to get to that spot, and it's called narrative-driven innovation. And Amanda Manna's over there. She's the director that runs all of narrative for Lowe's. And yes, there is a director that runs all of narrative for Lowe's.
So you have someone with a title of narrative innovation?
She's the head of narrative-driven innovation, which is like the coolest title ever. Sorry, Josh, who's my other director that's sitting over there, but it is super cool. And what that allows us to do is to understand what we're going to do and think through the positive, like how important that is for us to do that, rather than all of the pain and the uncertainty it's going to take to get us there. If I had come to our CEO and said, like, hey, we're going to start putting 3D printers and partnering with these amazing made-in-space company and put 3D printer in outer space and print space tools, he would have laughed me out of his office, and I'd probably be looking for another job. But because we have these stories of where we're trying to go, we seed the future in order to make that happen. So all of the things that you're seeing are manifestations of these larger narratives that we're working towards.
Can you spend just a minute describing the process of this whole science fiction thing?
So it is a process, and it manifests in different ways, but essentially what it is, we give all of our marketing, research, and trend data to professional published science fiction writers. And the reason we do that is science fiction writers are uniquely capable of sifting through all the stuff that could happen and putting it together in a way that is real. So I wouldn't think some crazy outlandish Star Wars kind of a thing, but more of a Back to the Future Part 2, right? Where it's probable, possible convergences of people and tech trends, which is really important. And I think that's missing in a lot of the tech talk. There's people trends that are happening at the same times, and that's what really is really important. And how do we fit in that?
And do the current conditions of the company play a role? Like, how free are they from the
Very
realities
free.
of the current company?
Very free. So it's independent of all that, and that's the beauty of working with a science fiction writer who you're working with but is not part of the system. They don't understand the politics. They don't understand what's been tried before and failed. And all of the nomenclature you're not allowed to use, like every company has. They're free to do that, and we iterate with them to get to the right spot, but that's how we're able to be more free.
So can you talk for a minute about the role that your CEO has played in being an advocate of this, and even your role in getting him to understand and embrace this? One of the things that I talk about in the classroom with our participants is the conditions that we need to create inside of the organization for these playbooks to be successful. And the number one condition, in my view, is having a direct line to the CEO or somebody in a real position of influence. You have to engage that person. They have to be a genuine believer. So how did you get your CEO to get this?
Most definitely. So he clearly is a visionary person, and I'm not just saying that because I work there. I think what we've done speaks for itself. It wouldn't have happened in a different setting. But you do have to have that air cover. You do have to have that understanding of what we're trying to achieve, and I don't want to overstate, but the narrative is what gets us to that part. So they understand what the narrative is that we're trying to achieve, not necessarily all of the fits and starts along the way to get us there. And that's really the only thing that they should be focusing on, and let us take care of all of the technical details.
Right. So can you talk, so what you did, I think, is you developed these comic books.
Yeah.
You had a picture of one. It was true comic books, and you presented them to your CEO as sort of your strategic plan.
Exactly.
And then worked backward to develop a roadmap for each of those sort of future scenarios. Is that right?
That's exactly right. So we do this in a number of different settings and things, but we literally make these stories, hand out these comic books or short stories to our executive team. They'll read them, and then we iterate back and forth, and they'll say, Kyle and team, go and build this first, that second, that third, that fourth. We have no idea how we're going to do that most of the time.
That's like a moonshot, right?
For us, beyond a moonshot. It'd be like a Mars shot. To get to Lowe's is not a technical company at its core. I mean, we are an amazing retailer with a long history, but to do the things we've done requires these uncommon partnerships and a little bit of gumption to get to where we've gotten so far.
Okay, so I want to get into uncommon partnerships in just a second, but before we do that, I'm curious, you have a team that's dedicated to these initiatives and these efforts. What role does the rest of the organization play? We talk a lot about the corporate antibodies here. Every organization has them. What role do they play? What relationship do they have to this future that you're building for Lowe's?
Yeah, great. So once I said at the beginning of the previous thing, Lowe's purpose is to help people love where they live. And I know this sounds so corny, but it's really true. We all are trying to help people love where they live in the future. That's our role. So most of the company is focused on helping people fulfill that purpose now, and that's great. I'm glad. It gives us the capital and the ability and the leverage in order to seed the future, but someone's got to be doing that. In our distant past, the idea of these big boxes that are now incredibly profitable and helpful and great was a crazy, disturbing, disruptive idea. And so we have to do that systematically and structurally now in order not even just to thrive, but to survive. And there's that understanding from the organization largely, and definitely from the top, that we need to do these things, and they're going to be difficult, they're going to be hard, but we have to. We have to.
That's great. That's important. Okay, so let's talk about this uncommon partner thing. In your own words, what is an uncommon partner?
So I know Carin always hated this when I first said this, because I worded it awkwardly. It's back to my behavioral science background. I worded it awkwardly on purpose. So uncommon partners is two things. It's very, very literal. One is uncommon, the kind of partner like fellow robots, like Made in Space, that when you hear it and you think Lowe's, you're like, I would never think they would work together. Great. That's the uncommon piece. And then the other thing is a partnership. This is going to sound corny too, but we really are partners. So that partnership means you have open, real communication about what's working and not working, so you can iterate quickly. And a really great example of those uncommon partners really are Made in Space, and because of the great news today, with fellow robots. I mean, we were able to share the best of each other in order to build something we couldn't have built on our own, and iterated a number of times to get to the spot we're at today. And that's incredibly powerful. And that's, if you look at the history of the world, big advances happen when uncommon partners get together. And I think that's the thing that, SU was really attractive to me, because that was a place where these kind of people could get together, and that was the focus around action, around sharing and learning, but with an action to implement this stuff.
When we were backstage getting ready for this, the Made in Space team was there, and Jason was telling everybody how you met them. And it was because Jason went to Emmeline, so Jason's a Global Solutions Program grad, went to Emmeline, who said, talk to Carin, and as soon as they sat in my office and said, we've got this opportunity, and according to Jason, I freaked out and was like, you've got to talk to Kyle. And those kinds of conversations happen all the time at Singularity University. You have this ecosystem of just incredibly diverse, interesting people pushing the boundaries. partners. If you're in a big company like Lowe's, you want to be embedded in that. Which leads me to my next question, which is, if you're an organization, how do you think about setting yourselves up to encounter these uncommon partners? What do you do?
Well, first of all, you have to know what you want to do, right? So there's, I don't want to cast dispersions on the rest of the corporate innovation industrial complex, but what happens is you see a lot of people with great intention, but they don't exactly know what they want to do, so they just kind of wander around. And if you're wandering around something, you might get lucky, but if you don't really know what you're going to do, either you're not going to be thinking of something in a different context than what's being presented to you, which is what happens all the time. And then, or you're not able to sell it back into the organization in the way that you would want to because you haven't pre-tenderized your organization to be ready to receive it.
So is that what the stories, the narratives do for you?
That's exactly right.
So you have the narratives, and then you go out in the world. You're like this little scout that's cruising around the world, finding these potential collaborators that can feed into those narratives and help build them. Is that
exactly. Right? And then also, so what to look for, but then also what we're not going to pursue, even if it's really cool and or could be profitable. Because it's not it's not what we're going for. It's not what we've agreed we're going to be pursuing. Focus
helps.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of innovation networks out there today, right? A lot of corporate innovation conferences and corporate innovation networks. And what do you think sets apart the ones that are effective for an organization like yours?
Well, for us, it's action. So it's not to go to a conference to just listen and passively receive. And you see that in a lot of innovation settings where it's like this innovation by osmosis or by like some sort of association. But like Singularity, the people that come to Singularity want to take action. And whether that be for Lowe's, to help people love where they live, or for space, or what have you, you're here to take action. You're here to get together to learn to take action. And I think that's what's really, really important.
Yeah. And you can tell when you meet those people, because I'm sure many of you have had that experience where you meet someone, you're like, we're part of the same tribe.
That's exactly
right. That
right.
happens a lot at Singularity University. In fact, something that we're experimenting with, we just launched actually a couple weeks, is called the Innovators Network. We're launching it out of SU Labs, and with the intention of bringing the action-oriented doers of our community, from corporations and startups, et cetera, together to identify collaboration opportunities. It's not to sit and talk about best practices, it's to actually say, what are you interested in? Let's collaborate. And ideally, a lot of those projects that come out of those conversations are truly having meaningful impact in the world. I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out. We don't have much time left, so I'll ask you one final question. Many startups want to work with corporates, and many corporates want to work with startups, and that's kind of been a big thing for a while. And you seem to have done it really successfully. You talked about building meaningful partnerships. Can you say more and perhaps give a tip or two about how organizations can really drive very effective relationships with these entrepreneurs?
So I said the second thing I would say I've already said, which is you have to have tenderized your organization you have to know what you're going to do in order to find the right kind of technical partners or whatever it is to be able to make that thing work. That's critical, and I think I said that pretty well before. The most important piece by far is finding the right people. Mm-hmm. The right people, and you said it before, you find what we call like kindred spirits. Like I can just tell we're going to work together and that kind of thing. And that goes for people that you're going to partner with, but also goes for your own team. So my team, I know I love them. They're incredible. They understand what to do, and I fully trust that they can do it just as well as I can, and they can go out and find the right people to work with, and then we can also bring them into the fold of that narrative that we're trying to achieve. So really it's about knowing what you want to do, both internally and externally, and then also just having a good sense for people so that you can work with them and what kind of people are you want to work with and not work with. The solutions kind of take care of themselves if you bring the right people together. I've seen it over and over and over again.
Awesome. I'd like to bring someone on stage right now who's going to answer the same question, and that is one of the entrepreneurs that you've worked very closely with, and that is Marco Mascorro, who's the CEO of Fellow Robots.
Thank you.
Hey, Marco.
Hi.
Hi.
Happy to join you guys.
Thank you for being here. Really exciting work that you guys have done together. I remember the first version of your robot, wheeling it out to the executive team of Lowe's, which was a really amazing experience, seeing something tangible, which really created some light bulbs for them. So I wonder if you could answer the same question for us. You are a startup working with a giant corporation. Can you give the audience any tips on how to make that a really effective relationship?
Yeah, I think one of the key things here is we start merging both strengths from small company and a big company. We can achieve great things. one of the things is we see how big corporations have the expertise. I mean, in our case, for example, we're expert in robotics, and partnering with a retailer brought a lot of value to the company to understand very clearly what the challenges that we're facing at the time. And we saw, okay, we have the technology, we have an amazing team that can do amazing stuff. By doing this partnership, the benefit of saying a startup can execute things really quickly, well, we have the expertise of a big retailer doing these things. And actually, we have the robots here on stage. This is the second version of the robot, and Kyle talked a little bit about how this process actually was done through many iterations. This is not the first shot. Took us a lot of time to get here, and a lot of learning, a lot of things that probably even Kyle can talk a little bit more about. But it's an amazing partnership, and one of the tips, advices is for big corporations, I think you need to bring people like Kyle, of course, into these organizations to see what is going to be next in technologies, what is going to be next, what is going to be those technologies that are going to disrupt your company, so you have them on board and you are yourself disrupting yourself. And that is something that Kyle brings really, really clearly to Lowe's, and it's an amazing partnership that we've done with them.
Thanks, Marco.
Great. So I believe you two have something of an announcement to share with, with the audience.
Marco, do you want to?
Sure. So we've been working since 2014 with Lowe's. Has been an amazing partnership. We deployed the first version of the robots called Oshbot in an Orchard store, which is part of Lowe's. Today we announced actually that we're going to roll out these robots in all the stores in Silicon Valley, which are 11 stores going from San Francisco to San Jose, Pleasanton. And we're going to have these robots actually doing two things. We're going to be helping customers. So you walk inside of the store, the robot comes to you and says, hey, how can I help you? You can talk to it in multiple languages, English, Spanish, whatever you want to talk to it. Hey, I'm looking for nails, hammers, whatever you're looking for. It's going to show you all the items available in that specific store. You're going to click on the item you're looking for, and it's going to actually guide you to the pro location. At the same time, when it's guiding you, it can also do inventory management. So we check what's on the shelves so that we provide really accurate information of what's in stock in the store. And that helps both the customer and the retailer at the same time.
Anything you want to add?
Yeah.
Very cool.
No. I think the really cool thing, so, for growing up, you always thought the robots would be in your everyday life. There are autonomous robots inside of all of the Lowe's stores. Will be autonomous robots inside of all of the Lowe's stores in the near future, starting next month. So it's about, once again, the narrative was there, finding the right critical partner was there, and iterating a number of times, and being very open and honest on both sides, what was working, wasn't working, is what got to this part. And just to set the context, from a brief conversation that Marco and I had, from that, 10 months later, we had the first Oshbot rolling, actually working autonomously inside the store. So you can do crazy things if you have the right partners and the right people.
Awesome. Do you want to show them the quick video,
Yeah.
and then we'll wrap up?
You want to make your home better. Our job is to help you. So we're building new tools that help our associates help you better. We partnered with fellow robots to bring you Lowbot. We spent close to 2 years honing Lowbot, and soon it'll be coming to select Lowe's stores to help you.
Hi, I'm looking for some paint.
Need to find something? Lowbot can show you, and in multiple languages. Lowbot also helps our team by constantly monitoring inventory, giving us daily feedback about what is in stock in the store. All of this allows our staff to focus on what they do best, helping you.
Very cool. Nice work. Yep. So thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions or want any information about how we collaborated together in the various programs that we use at SU Labs to drive projects and relationships like this, then please see us or anyone on the SU team. So thank you very much.
Thanks.